Yeah, so today we continue from Matthew chapter 18, verse 12. So here we have the parable of the lost sheep. Here in the case of Matthew's gospel, the sheep goes astray. That's the word that Matthew uses. So it's about people who go away from the faith, who fall astray, and how to bring them back. So what do you think if a man has 100 sheep, one of them has gone astray? Does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Now in Israel, usually it was the whole village that would take care of the sheep, not just one shepherd. So there would be 2 or 3 shepherds in charge of a group of sheep, like 100 sheep. So what happens is this man realizes suddenly that one of his sheep is not there, is missing. So he asks the other shepherds to take care of his other 99 sheep, and he goes in search. Okay, he goes in search, and of course they inform the whole village that that one sheep is missing. So he goes, and it's a very arduous journey. It's very dangerous because he could even fall to his death. But then the shepherd really wants to get the sheep back. So his intent is somehow to bring it back. So he goes, he finds it, and then he puts it on his shoulder and he rejoices. And then when he comes back, the whole village is happy, that the sheep has come back. So it is not the will of my Father who's in heaven, one of these little ones should perish. The whole situation here is one of joy when one person who has gone astray comes back. Now that is the key point here. So when God brings back someone who has slipped, someone who has gone away from the faith, someone who has strayed, it is not to reprimand him and to tell him, look, I'm giving you a last warning. Nothing of that sort, but rather only joy and love. Love is seen when the person doesn't do anything to the sheep, just puts it on his shoulder and he brings it back. And remember, the sheep gets lost because of its own foolishness, not because of anything else. Okay, the other 99 were all safe. The one sheep that got lost was lost because of its foolishness. And human beings also, in their foolishness, can go away. But God doesn't reprimand them, doesn't warn them. What he does is he gently brings them back. He goes after the sheep. No, he doesn't wait for the sheep to come. The sheep will never come back on its own because it's stuck somewhere. So he goes. The shepherd takes the initiative. He goes, he finds the sheep, he puts it on his shoulder. There is joy on his face, and he comes back rejoicing, and the whole village rejoices. So this is exactly what happens in a community where somebody who is lost, you know, the pastor goes after that sheep and he finds the sheep, he speaks with him, he brings him back, and the whole community rejoices. This is how a Christian community should be. That's what Matthew is saying. See? Then he goes on further. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Very beautiful message for us. Sometimes people hurt us. And when we are hurt, what do? We don't talk about it to the rest of the world, keep saying, this person has hurt me, he did this to me, she did this to me. No. He says, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. Sometimes the other person, they says something or does something inadvertently without realizing it. So he may not even be aware, or she may not be aware that you are hurt. So when you go and talk to them, that is when there is reconciliation. So that person will say, really, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this, but I'm really sorry. And there ends the matter. Okay, you have gained your brother. So this relationship that is strained is now set right. But there are cases where the other person is very clear about what he or she has said and is, nothing doing, I don't want to be uh, reconciled. So what do we do? So if he does not listen, but if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of two or three witnesses. So this is getting a little more business-like. So now we are taking along with us one or two witnesses. Why? Because they also must confirm what has happened and understand the situation. Now, don't look at it legalistically. Of course, this has got reference to the book of Deuteronomy, because that is what is mentioned there, that you take two or three witnesses. But here it is just one or two witnesses. Okay. So, and then confirm by the evidence of two or three witnesses. Now, the point of the matter is this: we want to somehow bring back that person. The strained relationship should not continue in a community. So if there is someone who is continuing to, be angry with you, be upset with you, or has sinned against you, you go to him. If you're not able to do it alone, go to him with a couple of others, with two or three others, but somehow try to win this person over. If that person refuses to listen even to them, tell it to the community. The word church is used, but that may not be the right word. What it means is community, because in the time of Jesus, there was no church. Organized church came much later, no? So Christians were living in a community, and by the time Jesus was there, there was no community even. So only after Pentecost, they started forming communities. So what Matthew is writing after so many years is he's saying, tell it to the community, the ecclesiastical community. And if he refuses to listen even to the community, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Now, this does not mean excommunication. No. What this means is, you see, Jesus always loved the Gentiles and the tax collectors. Although they were outsiders for the Jews, Jesus still went and visited them. So Jesus, when he's saying treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector, he doesn't say excommunicate that person, but rather look at this person as someone who has gone out, but as someone whom you can still win over by love. Very important, because Jesus won over the Gentiles and tax collectors by love. He had friends like Zacchaeus and Matthew who were tax collectors, and he won them over with his love. And so he says, let them beat you like a Gentile and tax collector, where you go to them, although they are outside, they have completely gone out. You go to them and you receive them into your community. You show love to them. Probably they will come back. So we have to do what Jesus did by inviting them back, by being loving and kind, so that they come back. There are people who will be very hard, very difficult to talk to or convince, but you keep loving them, and there will definitely be a solution to this. So we have to do what Jesus did. Okay. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So this is the authority that Jesus gives to the disciples or the followers of Peter. Of course, he doesn't talk about the keys of the kingdom, but he talks about binding and loosing, which means authority is given to the successors of Peter, okay, who are the bishops and the cardinals and so on, and the priests. So he gives authority that whatever you bind and whatever you loose, that shall have an impact in heaven. So this binding and loosing that we do is not a temporary thing, but something which has an eternal impact. Okay, that is why it talks about heaven and earth. What we do on earth will have a permanent effect even in heaven. Again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So when two of us or three of us or some of us meet at a prayer meeting or in a Bible study or in a prayer group, what Jesus is saying is, if you pray for somebody, pray for one another, God will definitely answer your prayer. So the praying in a community is so important. Why? Because it is a selfless prayer. I'm not thinking only about myself and praying for my needs. No, I'm praying for others. So if we agree on earth about anything they ask, that means you and I come to a consensus and we ask for something. God wants to answer that prayer. Of course, it may not be in the way we are asking. See, Jesus also prayed, but he still had to go to the cross. And even in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was praying, Father, if it's possible, take this cup away from me. Yet, God, my will. But our prayer also should be one which offers itself completely to God in surrender. I surrender this situation, O Lord, into your hands. I think this will be the solution, but you know better. God knows best. And so we leave it in the hands of God when we pray for something, knowing that our prayer is always answered. God always gives a quality answer. So there is no such thing as unanswered prayer, but that God gives a quality answer to our prayers in His own way, in His own time, and definitely He wants us to pray. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often shall my sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times. Because in the Jewish custom, the law said, you can forgive a person 3 times. So Peter, being very generous, he uses the number 7. And so he says, can I forgive somebody 7 times, Lord, because you're such a loving person. So you're talking about forgiveness and all that. So can I forgive a person 7 times? Is that good? Is that good enough? Jesus says, no, it is not good enough. I do not say to you 70 490 times. It is times without number. You see, where God basically keeps forgiving us all the time. Every single day we are forgiven. Every single day God gives us a clean sheet, and we are renewed every morning. Every day when God gives us the sunrise, His mercies are new every morning. And so forgiveness for us is not something where we calculate and forgive. Then it's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is something that happens naturally. Because if you look at the human body itself, the body constantly tends to bring itself back to its original position. For instance, if you cut yourself somewhere, if there is a wound, what does the body do? The cells in the body immediately want to restore that part again, right? It doesn't say, no, I don't care about this part of the body. No, the moment there is any wound on your body, anywhere in any part of your body, the whole position. Now, forgiveness is like that. Anything that is order, you immediately want to set it right. You don't keep counting and saying, no, no, I've done it and I can't do it again. No. Forgiveness is something that happens unself-consciously. You keep on forgiving because that is how God forgives. God goes on forgiving. And now he's going to talk about the extent of forgiveness, because in forgiveness we talk about different levels. And so Jesus is giving a fantastic example. He says, therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began the reckoning, one was brought to him, owed him 10,000 talents. Okay, just for your information, just one talent is 15 years' salary. Just imagine, one talent is 15 years' salary. So 10,000 talents is 15 years into 10,000 years. So that is the kind of debt this servant owed the king. Of course, it's a very uh, huge figure, unimaginable figure. So how did he fall into such a debt? We don't know. But he has fallen into this debt. And as he could not pay, his lord ordered him to be sold along with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the Lord of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. Imagine, this is a debt this man could have never ever paid after giving all that he had, his wife, his children, his property, whatever he had, whatever possessions he had to give everything. In spite of that, he could not pay. Imagine such a huge amount. Even if his children and grandchildren are slaves to this Lord, they still cannot repay the debt. Such a huge debt. But this master is such a kind man, such a forgiving man. He not only forgave him, he released him. He said, Go, and the debt is cancelled. But that same servant, as he went out, totally ungrateful, no, came upon one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. Now, 1 denarii is 1 day's salary. So, 100 denarii is 100 days' salary, about 3 months' salary. Whereas 3 months vis-a-vis 15 into 10,000 years. No comparison. And seizing him by the throat, he said, Pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and besought him, Have patience with me and I will pay you. Now this man could have actually paid him if he had waited, no? Because it's not a big amount. It's just 3 months' salary. Somehow by hard work and by some extra work, he could have somehow paid this money back. But this fellow refused to wait. He refused and went and put him in prison till he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. And the Lord summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you besought me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his Lord delivered him to the jailers. Another translation says, torturers, till he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother, your sister from your heart. So the example that Jesus is giving is a very hyperbolic example, no? A comparison which is something so huge. 15 into 10,000 years versus 3 months. You can't compare these two figures. It looks infinitesimally small as compared to the huge debt that this man owes the king, the Lord. But then this man, instead of feeling, so joyful that he is forgiven, could have easily said, Oh, after all, he's done only so much, I'll forgive him. He doesn't do that. And he says that is human nature. That is what we are doing. We crib about small things. We don't talk to people for years together, sometimes even for generations, because of some silly thing that happened. If you actually go to the root cause and find out what happened, you'll find it's very silly. And yet, we go on like this for years. And what happens? You are the one who suffers. The one who is hurt is the one who suffers, because today doctors tell us that many of these psychosomatic diseases like asthma, ulcer, cancer very often stem from unforgiveness. Because we don't forgive people, our body chemistry changes and it starts working against us. Harboring anger, hatred starts working within us. Whether the other person is affected or not, I am affected and I start getting very sick. As a consequence, I suffer. All I need to do is forgive and release that person. We just have to release that person. And we are not willing to do that. We would rather suffer than allow that person to be set free. That is what Jesus is saying. You cannot live in a community and, have this kind of hatred. And he says, so also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart, brother or sister. So, if you don't forgive, you don't expect God to forgive you. Jesus is saying you are closing the door. God doesn't close the door. God's forgiveness is like the sun and the rain that falls on us. But you and I can shut the door and say, Lord, do not forgive me because I haven't forgiven. What do we say in the Our Father? Forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who have trespassed against us. So, Lord, forgive me only to the extent to which I have forgiven, not more than that. And so we are tying God's hands. So we need to understand this truth that forgiveness is something that comes from God. And this forgiveness should flow through us to others. We should not be blocks. We should only be channels of God's forgiveness, mercy, and love. But if we become a block, each one of us becomes a block, then the whole community suffers. Because if one member suffers, all the members suffer together. Because you and I are part of a body. See, in a human body, if there is any wound somewhere, it's not that part alone that suffers, it's the whole body that suffers. If you have a headache or a stomach ache, I mean, your whole body is down, right? You cannot continue and say, no, no, it's only the head that's paining, the rest of the body is fine. No, only the stomach is paining, the rest of the body is fine. You can't go on. If one member suffers, the whole body suffers. That's what Paul says. So, if you and I have unforgiveness, Jesus says you need to forgive. Because God forgives us every time. He doesn't count. He doesn't have an account of how many times we have hurt him. No, he puts it behind him. And we too need to put it behind us. Put all these hurts behind us. Whatever people may have said, whether they meant it or didn't mean it, I release them. I forgive them. And when I do that, I experience God's forgiveness and healing. Matthew chapter 19. Now, when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him and he healed them there. See, Jesus is constantly working. He's healing people. He's constantly setting people free. And Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Today's context, this question of divorce becomes even more relevant because we are living in a time and age when divorce has become so common. Already in the time of Jesus, they are talking about divorce because it was happening among the Jews. And imagine today it's grown manyfold, it's grown manifold. Divorce has become such a common thing. And so this question, can I divorce my spouse for any reason? He answered, no. The answer from Jesus is no, very clearly no. Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. So this is from God, where God has decided that these two people should come together, and he has made them one. So he says, let not any human being divide them. But the Pharisees continue. They said to him, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce to put her away? He said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. See? So in God's plan, there is no divorce. There is no divorce at all. And I say to you, now Jesus is saying, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery. Very clear, no? So living an adulterous life, living a sinful life is not in the plan of God. But human beings are doing this all the time. But we see in God's eyes, this is terribly wrong. So this is something we need to look at very, very seriously, because God's plan is to bring two people together and keep them united forever. And it is we, by our sinfulness, by our selfishness, we want to be separated, we want to be divorced. And God says, no, it is not my plan. From the beginning, it was not so. The disciples said to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is not expedient to marry. Now they're going to the other extreme now, because they see practically that divorce is happening in the world around them. And so they're saying, if that is the case, he says it's better not to marry. But he said to them, not all men can receive this saying, but only to those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. He who is able to receive this, let him receive it. Now here Jesus is talking about those who can abstain from marriage. That is what he is talking about. Not all men can receive this. So there are people who are living as if, they do not have any sexuality. So he says that is not for everyone, but only for those to whom it is given. So eunuchs by nature, that is by birth, it's a birth defect. So they are eunuchs. And then people are made eunuchs by others. And then there are those who have made themselves eunuchs, in the sense they have abstained from sexuality because of the sake of the kingdom, because they have married themselves to God. So that is why in the religious life, we're talking about chastity. One of the vows is the vow of chastity, because their husband is God. And so they don't look at any human being, any man or woman, but their spouse is God. They have espoused God. And so it is not for everyone, because some people cannot abstain. Therefore, it is better that they marry. Then children were brought to him that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked the people, but Jesus said, let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them and went away. So here Jesus is talking about children, and for the Jews, children were considered sinful, were considered not someone important, because women and children did not learn the law, and so they are considered very low in society. And so that is why the disciples rebuke the children. They don't treat them well. Jesus said, "Let the children come to me. For only when you become like a child, the kingdom of heaven belongs to you." So he says, do not despise children. Do not think they are inferior. No, because this quality of a child is so beautiful. And you fellows, you also need to become like children, not become childish, but childlike. You see, the quality of a child is to trust, is to, look at look at life in a very open way, without having filters, without having, you know, dark glasses, but to look at everything naturally, to look at everything without any filter, and to accept, whatever comes joyfully. All this is so beautiful in a child, trusting people. So this quality of a child is something that God always wants us to have. Never lose this quality, he says, because only when you have this childlike quality can you enter the kingdom of heaven. And so he laid his hands on them and went away. So I'll stop with this today, because many of us are wanting to go.